Welcome, everybody, to day one, session one of our Good Seeds mini conference. We're really glad to have you with us today. This event is hosted by the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian seed security in Atlantic Canada. My name is Stephanie Hughes, and I'm the program coordinator for the initiative in the 4 Atlantic provinces. If we've not been previously acquainted, or if you're new to the Bauta Family Initiative, I enthusiastically invite you to jot down the information on your screen or just quickly give it a screenshot. I would really welcome hearing from you if you have questions about our program or the activities that we support in the Atlantic region. I would also love to hear about your experience with seeds, seed saving, and farming, so feel free to please get in touch with me. I'm going to begin our time together today with a land acknowledgement that's relevant to the place that I call home. I invite you to participate in this if you're interested by typing into the chat box on your Zoom app where you're joining us from. So if you know the Indigenous name of your community, please share that with us as we take a minute to appreciate in this very small but important way the history of the land that we're on. So I'm joining our call today from the colonial borders of Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is situated in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I've spent most of my life in the Maritimes, and it's only in the last few years that I've come to know that this land is Mi'kma'ki, a quite significant stretch of territory which encompasses many communities in Atlantic Canada, including all of modern-day Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, much of New Brunswick, and even some of Newfoundland. As a community of people who care about good seed and good food, I think we have maybe an extra special responsibility to think also about Indigenous land as the places where our food and seed are grown, as well as reflecting on by whom and for whom that food and seed are grown. So I think for us, notions of justice or peace and reconciliation might have a special meaning in terms of the work that we do. On that note, I wanted to tell you about an initiative that was launched this year by Sovereign Seeds in support of something called the COVID-19 Indigenous Seed Crisis Response Circle. So the Seed Crisis Response Circle is a collective of Indigenous seed keepers who are growing out Indigenous seed varieties, increasing their supply, and then redistributing that Indigenous seed to individuals and initiatives who need access to their seeds for food and seed saving. So this year we've all witnessed kind of the rush on seeds because of COVID-19. And while that interest in seeds and gardening and seed saving is really exciting, in communities where seed supplies were precarious, they're much more so now. So the COVID-19 Indigenous Seed Crisis Response Circle is a way of kind of addressing that threat and at the same time building collective capacity. This is not a seed change fundraiser, just to be transparent. It's something that we're supporting in an effort towards solidarity and food justice. It is a decolonially driven, Indigenous-led seed sovereignty initiative. So they're partway to their goal of fundraising $35,000. And if you're able, I think making a contribution to this fundraiser is a really powerful way to support Indigenous seed sovereignty. There's also room to amplify this effort by communicating about it to your networks. So if you would be interested in having more information about it, posting about it on social media, or maybe writing an email to a few friends who might be interested, I just encourage you to get in touch with me first. The program leaders have shared some language with me that I could share with you so that when we communicate about it, we're always being respectful of the Indigenous leadership of the project and the messages that they want to be disseminated about it. In the next couple of minutes, I will put my contact information into the chat box so that you can reach out to me if that's something that interests you, and thank you in advance. So today we're going to welcome 4 speakers, each of whom bring really rich insights to the topic of the seed industry from their own experience, working in the part of the seed industry that serves organic and agroecological growers. I sent each of their bios to you by email, so I won't read those now, but I will just very briefly and very warmly welcome Kim Delaney of Hawthorne Farm in Ontario, Paul Betz from Mowing Seeds, and Adrienne Shelton from Vitalis Seeds, who are both joining from Vermont, and Heron Breen, who's joining us from Maine, where he works as part of the Fedco Seeds team, as well as running Fruits of Our Labor farm. So throughout each of their presentations, participants are going to be muted, but if you have any questions, please type them into the chat on your Zoom app. What we're going to do is take kind of short or clarifying questions after each presentation. We'll try to leave room for one or two of those. And then if you have longer questions or questions that are directed to more than one speaker, we're going to save those to the last 10 minutes or so of the webinar. So don't be shy, type your questions in to make sure that we don't overlook you. Yeah, so Heron and I have actually collaborated very closely, co-designing this whole webinar series today and tomorrow. So for those of you who signed up for more than one webinar, you and me and he will all be very good friends by the end of the next 2 days. Heron, I'm going to pass the reins of this thing over to you now, and just thanks everybody for being here.
Yes, thank you. And actually, Steph's been doing 99% of the work, and we're just really all happy to be here today. The way we're going to structure the discussion today is first we're going to speak a little bit with our presenters, but I'm going to give a history of how seed has evolved, at least in European hands and trade in the Northeast and probably the world. And then we're going to talk a little bit as a group, the four presenters, about sort of how COVID-19 over the last course of the year has affected our operations and ourselves and the takeaways that we've had. And then Paul Betz from High Mowing is going to talk about the evolution of high mowing from the beginnings in 1996 to present day, celebrating 25 years. Congratulations, High Mowing. And then Adrienne Shelton from Vitalis is going to lead us through some of the hurdles and sort of following the seed around tomato seed in the global seed trade. There's been some interesting hurdles that coincided with COVID-19 in terms of diseases with seed crossing the borders that's affected both global seed companies as well as small seed companies. And then Kim Delaney is going to talk about the operation that they're running at Hawthorn and talk about that evolution. And hopefully we'll come all back together and have enough time for some good Q&A. Before I begin a history of this, I just wanted to ask our three other presenters to unmute themselves. And I wanted to ask each of you, starting with Kim, just frame a little bit of your role currently at Hawthorn and just tell us all, like, what was your history with seed? What was the place that you got into this work from?
Okay, so I'm the owner of Hawthorne Farm, and I got into seed initially because I was doing tallgrass prairie restoration work in Ontario on the north shores of the Great Lakes there, and we had to learn, since it was an endangered ecosystem, we had to go out in the wild and find the seed, learn how to clean it and treat it. And that's where I really developed my love of seed. And since I also love food very much, it gradually morphed over into saving seed for food crops as well.
Awesome, Kim, thank you. Paul, tell us how your role is at High Mowing. I'm sure it's evolved, what it is today, and how did you get into this seedy stuff?
So I moved to Vermont in the fall of 1995 with the intention of my wife and I starting a farm. And Tom Stearns also moved to Vermont in the fall of 1995 and ended up being about 1.5 miles from my house. And so we found each other within a couple, 3 weeks of having settled. And became friends. And I worked on a number of farms as we were kind of gaining some regional skills around variety, performance, and seasonality before we started our farm. And what he was doing was always interesting and exciting to me. But honestly, the time when I really started to think about seeds was when there was a fairly significant merger in the seed world. And Fedco drew a line with who they were going to be working with. And I remember being initially annoyed that some of the varieties that I was using on my farm were no longer going to be available to me through Fedco, but it sparked a conversation around the industry and who I was supporting and where the genetics were coming from and how they were being managed. And that kind of created like those conduits. So my role now at High Mowing, I'm the sales manager, but I also have a seat at the quality control table. I have a role in product development. I work very actively with our trials manager to do the qualitative analysis of our varieties before they enter the catalog. And then I also have a role in the catalog in the marketing department.
Thank you, Paul. Adrienne, tell us how your role at Vitalis has evolved from your beginnings with seed.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to the conversation. At my role at Vitalis, as Steph mentioned at the beginning, I live in Vermont, and I do product development, mainly in the Northeast. I do trials of our breeding material on organic farms. I have trials as far north as Quebec, as far south as New Jersey, and west to Wisconsin. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at our breeding material, trying to determine which of the potential varieties are the best performers on organic farms. And that is what helps to determine what we commercialize as organic seed. My history with seed started years ago. It was about the early 2000s. I think it might have been 2000 or 2001. There was an event that happened in southern Vermont called Restoring Our Seed. And I was working on a farm at the time and hadn't really given much thought to seed, and sort of on a whim decided to attend this conference. And little did I know it was full of quite an all-star list of organic seed thinkers and breeders at the time. C.R. Lawn was there, founder of Fedco. Tom Stearns was there, the founder of High Mowing. Raoul Robinson, if any of you guys are familiar with his work. Rowan White, John Nabazio, Frank Morton. And it was just an all-day weekend of learning about seed and plant breeding, and that was it. I was hooked after that. So I started saving seed on the farms I was working on, started a small trading library, ended up going to grad school for plant breeding, and worked for High Mowing, and now here I am at Vitalis. So it's a fun area to be involved in and a great community. So.
Thank you, Adrienne. Well, I should ask our moderator, our head moderator, Steph, to tell us a bit about herself, but if she wants to.
Sure. Thank you. That's nice. So I've been with the Bauta program since 2013. And I came to the Bauta program, which is all about Canadian seed security, from a background of food security and being really concerned about people's ability to feed themselves in urban environments. And so I found out about this program and I joined the team, and I just kind of went down the seeds rabbit hole, which has been and is an amazing way to bring that kind of food security question just down to the very roots of the matter. And so I've learned so much as being a staff member with the Bauta team, and this webinar is part of my learning journey as well. So thanks.
Thank you, Steph, for bringing us all together. Well, thank you all for coming today. You're going to be meeting these people more in depth throughout the session. One thing I would say is if for some reason I or any of us end up doing the Zoom freeze, we'll end up skipping ahead to the next person and hopefully circling back. So that's just the nature of doing this. Usually we're on the stage somewhere or somewhere, and we're 20 feet away from each other. In this situation, you're a lot closer to us, looking at each other's nostrils and eyebrows than we normally would. So even though we're farther apart, we're actually quite close. And none of us have learned to use stage makeup. So you're just going to have to live with it. So I'm going to begin with a little history from a long time ago, but it's not that long ago, to today, which actually has quite a bit of overlap with everybody's story here. So give me a second just to share my screen. Hold on, patience. Okay, please confirm that you are seeing that entry slide. Good. Okay, and is it full screen for everybody? Does that look good for everybody? Thumbs up? Okay, good. I'm really lucky to be able to have my life be completely enmeshed in seed. Thankfully, it's really great. I have a day job at Fedco, more than a day job most of the time. And I also have the other 60 hours a week or whatever it is, I do this other thing, and it's wonderful. I'd like to start today with this slide. This is Steve Silverbear Macomber's poster that he has made as a Mohawk seed keeper, exhibiting some of the types of Haudenosaunee corn. And actually, Steve has a new poster that has got some different corn on it. Some of the same, some different, that actually just came off the printer. So if folks are interested, they can reach out to him. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Steve. I'm framing this because this is really, if we want to look at this from a very European perspective, imagine this as a seed catalog, 20 some odd varieties of corn that you might see in a seed catalog. And of course, in the Iroquois, Mohawk, and the greater community of tribal affiliations, this was just a drop in the bucket of varieties that were being grown and maintained by these communities and shared and traded and stewarded. So this is a small snapshot of agriculture. But as we know, things changed. 1779, many of you are familiar with the Sullivan campaign that burned and displaced the Mohawk Nation as a whole from the greater New York area, Ohio, New York, etc. Many of them fled. It was timed right around when corn was ripening at the end of August through September. So folks left all of their agriculture and food and fled, and many starved. So that is the transition point for much of what is an embedded and deep evolved agriculture that is the foundation for the agriculture that we all share in general in the Northeast. And every tribe has its story, and I will not tell those stories. I will let those folks tell those stories. Next slide. So here we are in 1867. We are less than 100 years later. This is a book that Elliot Coleman should owe major royalties towards this person's family. Gardening for Profit, 1867, is basically the market farmer and gardener's Bible. And talks all about how to do everything that we are all currently, many of us in the market farming mode, are doing. So there's a very key chapter in the book called Seed and Seed Raising. It says, if there is one thing of paramount importance in vegetable gardening, it is purity of seed. And for this reason, every seed that is practicable for us to raise for our own use, we grow, no matter what the cost may be. If you read a little bit further, he goes into an example of how basically when they couldn't get good seed, what happened. So this is a time when seed was being imported and quite a bit from Europe. And there wasn't really seed companies in the same way that we have them now. And farmers and gardeners were growing their own seed because they had to, and because to get reliable, high quality, marketable supply, they really had no choice but to be seeds people. And Peter Henderson went on to actually found a seed company when seed companies became a thing. So this is 1910. This is, say, 40 years later, on the cusp of the Great War. This is Herbert Rawson, son of W.W. Rawson from Arlington, Massachusetts. And I should say Peter Henderson was based in New Jersey, New York. This book, Success in Market Gardening, is basically just a updated version of that previous book. Again, many royalties due for anyone writing garden books today. Nothing has changed, I will tell you. Again, another chapter very key about seeds, obviously. I'll just read this first part. Perhaps we might truthfully say that the most important of all points in gardening is the right selection of seeds, for without good seed, the care and expense devoted to selecting and fitting the land or procuring and using implements, fertilizers, etc., is bestowed in vain. By good seed, we not only mean such as will germinate properly, but such as is true to name and of the very best selected strains. It is proper in this connection to say that no one need expect to get seeds such as we have spoken at as such absurdly low prices as much cheap stuff is sold for. Better to pay twice the market price for an article that is first class in every respect than have poor trash, even if it be had as a gift. So this is a market grower telling us, even 100 years ago, that seed was important. Now, a couple pages later, rather than it being his first statement, the writer makes the statement that everyone who makes market gardening a business is obliged to raise at least a portion of the seed that they plant. So you can see that something's changed in 50 years where now there are seed companies. So that there's a course in here where he's talking about selecting stock seed and improving things or doing breeding work or having your own sort of stuff that you are knowing you're going to have, but there is a packet trade going on. And I will also say that the author was also an on-farm breeder. So books like this are basically full of descriptions of vegetables that have been bred by farmers and market gardeners. And that was basically the crop improvement that was going on from 1850 to about 1930. And this is their cucumber right there. I should use the little pointer right there. And if you're thinking these are just people that are fly by night, this is the scale that the Rossins were doing market gardening in their greenhouses. So that looks pretty legit to me. Here's a packet trade. Here we go. This is the A.L. Fisher Company from Brocksville, Ontario. I love this, just the key. I love this that the turnip is going. And actually, this is full of seed. This is one of the, these actually, this is a packet that's over 100 years old and it has seed in it, just so everyone knows. This is another seed company. Again, notice the grown by. These are the farmers and market growers who have picked up a trade and become seed companies because this is so their fellow farmers and gardeners can focus on those, what they're good at, and people began focusing on this work. Other reasons people grew seed. This is a canning label from Portland, Maine for pumpkin. This is Boston marrow squash. So, or selling to them would maintain their own strains of pumpkin or squash or peas or corn. This was so they had reliable quality and true to type and good production. Similar here, this is corn. All of the different corn canneries had their own strains of the corn that they were maintaining. They actually had stock fields. And most farmers were growing 10 acres or less of the sweet corn, and there was a farmer who was dedicated to growing the stock seed and selecting it for everybody. So that was going on up until about the 1930s. And then the canneries decided we needed to get more production. We need to get reliable production. There was competition in the marketplace. And in the Northeast, including in Canada, Connecticut and Maine developed the first inbred lines of sweet corn. Adrienne and other folks and Paul will be familiar with this basic operation being shown in these pictures of creating plant breeding and creating hybrids. And you'll see in here, this is a description from the 1947 seed catalog of the Robeson Seed Company. You'll see in this description of Camel Cross that they talk about these Connecticut experiment station lines. Here's some field corn where we see that the New York State College of Agriculture developing hybrids. that are then being grown by regional folks to serve regional farms. So the hybrid production actually started in the Northeast and served farms in the Northeast, and the seed production was also happening in the Northeast. This is a picture of folks in New York. This is again the 1947 Robeson Seed Catalog. This is a picture of their hybrid seed corn production fields. They produced over 700 acres of hybrid sweet corn in the mid-40s, hybrid sweet corn production in New York State. Folks said it couldn't be done. It's already been done. Tip of the cap to High Mowing for bringing some of this back to the Northeast. Thank you. This is something you would see, again, 1947, you would see this pretty much, you know, Fedco or High Mowing or Hawthorne doing trials. Any of us doing trials. These are folks just basically trialing their inbred lines, trialing their hybrids, new experimental crosses. And this is the seed corn dryer that they had. This is a massive building to dry 200 bushels of sweet corn a day. And we see the same old mailing order forms that we've all had for years. So this type of trade continued for decades. Not a lot changed, but I want to back up just a little bit to the 1910 situation where basically that cusp where I'll scroll back just a little bit. So this is the point where we see 1918 and the previous book being written in 1910. The Great War, World War I, happened between the two seed trade to North America, with the exception of the Dutch, who remained neutral during World War I and were able to basically become to capitalize on the lack of seed trade and the collapse of the French seed trade and the English seed trade at that time. So one of the reasons we see such powerhouses in global seed trade from Holland and other places is because basically their economies were able to take advantage, and so was the United States. We became one of the primary sources for high quality seed at this point, which launched all these seed companies that had these small packet trades. So here's a 1963. We can see here that hybrid seed production has begun. Same company, 1963 Robeson Seed Company. You can see they've also decided to appropriate a indigenous community's name, Seneca, naming all of their products with the word Seneca. And they had created a Seneca hybrid sweet corn line, which remained pretty much the standard of high quality sweet corn until the mid 2000s. So this is 1963. This catalog has the first hybrid tomato, the first hybrid eggplant, and the first hybrid spinach also in it. Then 1976, this is just a garden way, you know, how to garden thing. And you can see that saving seed has become sort of something that people do as a hobby. It's not the thing that, say, 70 years before was really firmly pronounced in those two books. This is the 1980s. We see these regional companies becoming quite large, serving very much the United States and even beyond sometime, but mostly the United States. They're still independently owned. Now, what happened at this point was the oil crisis of the 70s shifted the framework here from distributors and or breeders of seed to also people involved in investment who were looking at the idea of seed as a commodity, looking at the idea of, you know, trading in the currency markets to support long-term, you know, profitability. So getting away from oil. And we see there begins to be some combining of things. This is 1999. This is Seminis, which eventually was sold to Monsanto. Seminis was a combination of a bunch of seed companies, including Asgrow and the Robeson Seed Company that we just talked about. So right here, you'll see They have their Seneca corn. The aerobicin has been purchased. Their germplasm has been purchased by Seminus. And you'll see these are the very same zucchinis that you saw in the 1963 catalog, and this is 1999. They were bought in 1996, which is a good segue to high mowing. So Seminus purchased these companies, 4 or 5 companies in 1996. And many of these small companies that today have started to reinform organic, reinform seed in the Northeast, reinform small scale production, reinform market growing, started at the time when this very movement was starting. So that's a little history of, but I think we have one slide about global, currently how the global trade works, which I can't pull up. I wonder, Steph, if you have time to do that.
Sure, I can do that. That do the trick?
That does it. And this is a slide that Adrienne has given us, thank you, and made for us, customized today with the different ways that seed is both sold, grown, contract productions, and bred. Different folks breeding. Some of the same folks that are breeding are the same folks that are growing. Some of the same folks that are buying are the same folks that are growing and breeding. So you see these larger scale companies that are growing seed all over the world in different climates for appropriate reasons, mostly hybrid seed production, selling to regional and local seed companies, but also obviously just because it's big doesn't mean there's not a seed grower growing it. And just because it's mid-scale, we still all have seed growers growing for places like Fedco and high mowing. And then there's farmer breeders, public breeders, university breeders, government breeders. And then there's how the seed comes to us in direct sales or packet. So I'm going to stop for a moment and let everyone take a breath. Okay, I'd love to invite our other presenters to come off mute. And I wonder if anybody has anything they want to add to that before we move on from the presenters.
No.
Kim, Paul, Adrienne?
No.
All right. Let's move forward. So the next thing we're going to talk about is a little bit how the seed trade has been impacted by the last year's demand. I think everybody in the audience is probably aware that just like toilet paper, there was a run on seeds. And many of us were caught with our pants down, just like with the toilet paper. So, and it wasn't necessarily, just for framing this from the Fedco perspective, is that it wasn't that we didn't have seeds. It's that the ratio of orders to people pulling them was exponential. And it was, I just tell folks that we had the number of orders in a month in a weekend. So in one weekend, we got the same number of orders we would have gotten for a month. And that combined with the nature of the COVID-19, trying to keep people safe, many of us in the seed trade were forced to reduce the number of orders that we would take in a week. And I want to open this conversation up to our panelists here. And I wondered if, starting with Paul, I wonder, Paul, if you might frame for us what high mowing was experiencing sort of at the beginning and then kind of as the years progressed, and what are your takeaways from what's occurred?
Sure. So it's important to understand our customer order flow across the season. So most of our commercial growers have typically placed their orders by January, February, and March. And at that point, we start to see a shift towards home grower orders. So as the situation with COVID was really kind of coming on, we don't, I use the term goalposts, and that may not be the best way to do it, but in terms of like our busiest season, like we had hit the goalposts and we're kind of winding down. We have a number of people who have other seasonal jobs that they migrate to. And so we have a diminishing workforce in the warehouse anticipating a slowdown. And then when COVID, the lockdown really started to happen, our order volume just exploded. And so it went up close to 400%. And we, in terms of our inventory management, we pack to projections and manage the projections of what's actually on the shelf available to ship. But we also maintain a daily negative list so that an order comes in on day one. We give ourselves 2 days to pack anything that needs to be packed. And then on day 3, we ship the order. Hopefully it's all completed. If not, it goes into an incomplete status and develops a back order. And so we try to keep those internal back orders at an absolute minimum. When we finally turned off our website, we were 26,000 units in the red in terms of what we had to fill to manage our internal back orders. And to be clear, what you were saying, like we had most of that seed in-house, we just didn't have the capacity to get it into packets. We switched to double shifts so that we could still have a similar amount of people doing the work over a course of a day, but because of the side house, you know, we had to basically cut ourselves in half in terms of how many people could be in the warehouse. We developed the Pack to Freedom list, is what we called it, and kind of prioritized what we could pack in a time that would get them out the door at a time where they would still be relevant to people. And so we kind of deprioritized certain crop types because we knew that we weren't going to be able to get them out. At the same time, our ability to respond to the wave of emails put that response out to close to 2 weeks. So it was not unusual for someone to have placed an order and not know the status of their order for 2 weeks. We also turned off the incomplete piece of our fulfillment so that we could send people something as soon as it was available. So we were shipping close to 6,000 units a day for a couple of months and actually incurred close to $100,000 in extra shipping costs to get those orders out the door. So once that dust settled, we thought about how we could do that a little bit differently. And I don't know if you want me to go on to that now or if you want to come back to that later, but
yeah, let's come back to that later and let's is that okay? We'll
absolutely, yes sir.
Okay, great. We'll go around the room. Kim, how did this treat you folks in the beginning and since? How have you been handling this?
Sort of a similar story. So a lot of our the farmers that buy from us had already placed their orders, and we were starting to supply seed to our home gardeners, and all of a sudden the orders went through the roof. We tend to try and keep a 2 to 3 year supply of seed, depending on the crop type, you know, in storage. And we found that we were worried about running out of some things. So we were selling, we were probably about 200%, doing 200% more business. We had to get more staff in. We had the space to do that, so we could do that. One of our other big problems was we were running out of envelopes. We order many more tens of thousands of envelopes than we think we'll need, and we ran out. And so we just happened to have had a different envelope size that we had tens of thousands of those in stock. They didn't fit on our racks, so we were using them for custom orders and such. So suddenly there was that issue, having to change, having to figure out printing because we didn't have time to buy more envelopes in. So we had to deal with that. Another major issue for us was Canada Post was really suffering, and they had slowdowns. And so typically we would ship an order in province, it would get there within 3 days. Well, it was taking sometimes 6 to 8 weeks for an order to get an hour away from where our farm is based. So people would then be phoning, they would be contacting us through the website, and they would also be messaging us on social media. So what would have in the past been maybe one query about where's my seed became 8 different places we had to answer these people. So that just completely overwhelmed us as well. We had to dedicate people to dealing with that. So I think because we are a little smaller, there was some concern about running out of seed, and that was probably we didn't, but it was so close. So I think that's we also our systems were overwhelmed. We've grown steadily since when we started in 2008, and we always have a sort of a 1, 2, and 5 year plan for growing our systems, but we were just slammed. So our inventory controls, we had issues with that we had to deal with. And then so we finally after the Easter weekend, we had to, or just before Easter weekend, we shut down our website because we had piles of orders. So we shut it down. We reopened on the Tuesday after Easter weekend and did so much business in that one day. We had to shut down at the end of the day for another week or so. So all those things came into play. It was like, crazy times. And we've responded to them. We'll talk about that later, but that's sort of what happened here.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you. Adrienne, could you pull us back a little bit to how it was treating your company on a larger scale?
Sure, it definitely affected us in a different way, I would say, than what Paul and Kim have described. So if you remember from that diagram that Heron had up, we're a breeding and seed production company. So we distribute our seeds through other seed companies. We sell to High Mowing, we sell to Fedco. We're not selling seed direct to growers. And we have a broad dealer network in the US and Canada. So for our dealers, such as High Mowing, for example, as High Mowing started to see the real increase in demand for their seed, from their customers and a lot of new customers, especially home gardeners, that translated to increased orders of our varieties that High Mowing carries. But on the other hand, for dealers that we supply who mainly are servicing large wholesale growers, so growers that are mainly supplying, say, wholesale and food service, those growers were having the total opposite. Those dealers, I should say, were having the total opposite effect, where their growers were plowing in fields that they had in the ground because all of a sudden their markets had dried up with all food service essentially shutting down. And those growers were not, they were canceling their orders for their next planting because they had no markets. So we had some dealers that were seeing huge increases, and that was, we were getting those increased requests for more seed. And then we had other dealers where seed contracts that we had coming up were being canceled. And for us, in a similar way as what Paul was saying at High Mowing, for us, it wasn't necessarily an issue of running out of seed when we got the increased requests. But for us, the challenge is that we, without going too much into the details of how Enzazaden and Vitalis are set up, we're essentially a subsidiary of our home company based in Holland. And so in the US and Canada, we essentially purchase seed from our parent company in Holland, bring it over to Holland to our warehouse in California, and then from there, that's where we distribute it to our dealers. So for example, if we've got a request from High Mowing to say, hey, we need more of Sakura cherry tomato, we would go into our system and say, oh yeah, we can get you more seed. But by the time we put in the purchase plan to get that seed over from Holland, it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks. And as you heard Paul say, High Mowing was prioritizing their crops based on the planting season. And pretty soon it wasn't going to be possible to plant tomatoes for the majority of their customers and actually harvesting tomatoes. And so for us, we struggled to be able to fulfill those, we call them spot orders, in a timely manner because we had to bring that seed over from Holland. And then we also experienced some of the shipping delays, as Kim mentioned, as I think everyone did, whether you're ordering seed or getting a package through Amazon, everything slowed down as far as shipping. So that also contributed to it.
Yeah, thank you. Those are, great different perspectives of this, continually evolving situation. I'd love it if each of you could touch on the takeaways that you've had from this in your individual segments, which we're about to begin, just to move this along. So each of these presenters will be touching on what they've learned or how they are evolving their business plan to try to meet the possible need and also refill those seed coffers, as Kim was speaking of, from the demand. So we're going to move forward a little bit at this moment we're going to start with Paul Betz, who's going to take us a little journey through the evolution of high mowing. Paul, I will hand it over to you. Thank you, everybody.
And Paul is going to work on sharing his screen. He's going to do an amazing job. So there's this one. I'm going to drag this over. Okay, perfect. And y'all are seeing what I'm seeing, I hope?
Looks great, Paul. Yep.
Brilliant. All right. A couple of things. First, it's an honor to share this venue with these presenters, incredibly smart and sweet folks. And so I want to put a note on that. I also want to mention that while this is an amazing format in terms of mitigating geography and making it available to people that are in different parts of the countries and world, I honestly look forward to the time where we can be in the same space together. I've just been feeling that really strongly. And so I just felt it was appropriate to just touch on that. So let's see. So in terms of high mowing, quick snapshot, 1996. We're based in a very small town called Wolcott, Vermont. We've got about 700 varieties in the catalog, and they are all certified organic and non-GMO project verified, which is fairly unique in the seed world, the second designation. We have about 55 employees full-time year-round. And in the peak fulfillment season, we do bring on a number of other folks to work in our seed packing and our fulfillment and our quality control and our sales and customer service divisions. We kind of pump out when the demand is the highest. Maybe that's like closer to 60 to 70 folks in the fulfillment season. And this year we're printing about 156,000 catalogs, and our initial mailing, I believe, is about 90,000 people, 90,000 catalogs. And this is some of the folks who are in our staff picture this year. We weren't able to be in the same space together to take our annual staff picture, so we submitted selfies. And let's see. So in 1996, hold on a second, here we go. There we go. In 1996, again, we started with about 26 varieties. Tom grew them all in the catalog. He fulfilled all the orders. To be clear, the intention was never to have High Mowing Seeds be a one-person show. One of the things that Tom has done really well, create an excitement and an opportunity for other people to become a part of what we're doing at High Mowing Seeds, is one of his greatest strengths. And to that end, in 2000, he expanded a list of growers in Vermont. I was a seed grower for multiple seasons way back in the day while I was also farming. And while we were producing all the seeds for the catalog, again, in Vermont. It did become clear that while you can grow a seed anywhere, one always can't get the best quality seed everywhere. There were certain limitations in Vermont in terms of late season moisture. And so we could do the cucurbits and the solanaceous crops and the annual brassicas really well. And an occasional biennial. We do have some winter where we are, but we decided that it was better to increase some traction and find some folks in another part of the world who could help us do some of those open seeded crops. And so in 2001, we started to work with some other growers out west for those kinds of crop types. And then in 2006, we had expanded to about 278 varieties. We also added a number of hybrids, which was not without controversy. There were a number of people who were upset with our choice to do that. In terms of seed security, one, I'm not going to go into the whole hybrid thing right now, but there were a number of people who were concerned about this. The mission had always been to serve the needs of commercial growers, and there are certain places and certain crop types where those hybrids are really helpful for people that are farming to hit a production schedule or marketing contract. And so we were super excited about it. And in 2007 and 2008, really is when I think of High Mowing becoming the seed company that we are now. And so here we are in 2021, our 25th anniversary. We have over 700 varieties in the catalog. And I think that we've really grown to become a full farm catalog. And I'm pretty excited about this upcoming one. It's a great one. So the seed that comes to us comes from really two different sources, either off the shelf or from independent seed companies or through our contracts. And I'm going to focus mainly on the contracts. This is where our current growers are listed across the US. It's clear looking at the contracting has moved to the West. The real reason for that is that that's a great place to grow seed. And as we moved forward and had crop failures and challenges producing some of the seed that we were doing in New England, we've migrated out to the West. And there's an infrastructure for seed production out there. There's also a community of seed producers that can provide technical assistance to each other. And it's actually helped us to lower the cost and to increase the number of varieties that we have in the catalog. So I do want to mention that for clarity's sake, even if we're producing a seed on our farm, we think of it as a contract. And so our contracting network has allowed us a fair amount of flexibility and strength and resiliency in becoming where we are. We currently have between 30 and 40 active contract growers. Many of them are doing multiple productions for us. So for example, in 2019, we had 134 contracts placed. In 2020, we had 156 contracts placed. We have the ability to do open pollinated and hybrid productions. We also have the ability to work with public breeding programs. So for example, Brûlée is an open pollinated mini butternut that we licensed from Cornell and have done that production and made it available. We also have a variety called Pie Pita, which is a hulless seeded pie pumpkin. And I have a total crush on this variety. It's great quality flesh for making pies, as well as really nice seeds for oil or for eating. And then we can also advance varieties that come out of our breeding production. So for example, our picnic peppers and Ico pepper have come out of our breeding program. And then we also have the ability to work with seed breeders who don't have access to productions themselves. This year we're releasing a bean called Magnum. It comes from Earthwork Seeds, and we'll also be able to sell that to other seed companies as well. And lastly, we're licensed Supersonic, which is another F1 summer squash from Seneca Vegetable. And that's a variety that has been available conventionally and now will be available organically for folks who want to use that as a seed as well. And so all to say, our contracting network has allowed us to get to where we are, and has been kind of creates an opportunity for us to build more community, which is something that we're always about. So because we have our own farm, we have the chance to use that as a way to learn about the production of a given variety. A few years ago, when we were bringing the Allure sweet corn to the marketplace, the first year we had it out, we had it in 3 contracts. 2 of them failed. The first one was never planted because of a delayed spring. The second one made a crop but was lost to the weeds. And then the third one was being produced on our farm. And because we had a real excitement and investment in it, we were able to throw way more resources than a normal contract would have, such to the point where we never recovered the cost of the production from the sale of the seed. But what it did is gave us a lot of information in terms of how to manage the production, and then we could use that technical assistance to help the contracts that we placed in the future yield a successful crop. It also allowed us to get that variety into the catalog and available to other growers, prove to folks that it could be done, and grow interest in that variety. Now it's a variety that we are selling that outstrips our ability to produce it right now. We sell to other seed companies as well. And we've now also migrated this to a contract that we're placing in Chile. And so that will help us to further mitigate the liability of having a contract only in one place, and allows us to kind of break the 1 year, 1 cycle for production, so that we can always be bringing seed into the warehouse and having it available in a deeper and deeper supply. And so I think it's important to think about that in terms of having seed contracts be placed in multiple locations. One of the things that we've seen in terms of climate change is a lot of variability in terms of success from season to season. And so we oftentimes will place a contract in multiple locations, especially if it's a variety that's critically important to us. And that way, if one of them fails, we're still hopefully going to get the output from the second production. So our contracts, they're currently based on 2 years of projected sales. We've done that partly as a function of our ability to pay for the productions and also to store the seed. We're hoping to move to a 3 to 5 year projection level starting this spring. Forecasting further and further out allows us to bring in seed to cover any kind of backorder situation that we would have from season to season. And it also creates a buffer so that if the crop comes in short, we have the ability to bring in what it yields, hopefully cover at least 1 production season, and then place it again the upcoming season to have a more successful outcome. So that said, one of the things that I think is really cool about our contracting network is that for some of our varieties, a production of 2 to 10 pounds of tomato seeds or pepper seeds is what we need to cover those projections. And what that translates to is that we have contracts that we can place with growers of all different sizes and scopes. And so we also have productions where we're looking for 5,000 pounds of an arugula or a salad green. And while that may be out of the scope of a lot of growers, we do have the ability to work with smaller growers who are contracting as a portion of their business, or as a smaller seed grower who doesn't want to have to go to the market every Saturday. And we've just been able to build a network of folks. And I think it's one of the things that is the biggest strength of particularly the organic seed industry, working together, we are so much stronger for it. We have a contract manager who places all of the contracts and manages them, and is available to provide technical assistance as the production moves forward, and then is able to help with the receiving, and we can receive a dirty germ sample and bring it into our QC and kind of forecast any kind of milling or cleaning that may be needed prior to receipt, so they can kind of move through the process as quickly as possible. So in terms of what we're doing to be ready for this upcoming season, things that we have learned, we have brought in a number of storage containers. We're moving all of our non-seed warehouse materials out of our conditioned envelope to make room for more seed. We're buying any overages that were available on any of the productions that we had. Because most of the productions had already been placed prior to the sell down that we saw last season, we didn't really have an opportunity to place new ones that had gone by. But we are, again, buying any overages that we can. In terms of our outright purchases, we historically have managed staggered POs. And that was partly a function of cash flow. It was also a function of the ability to receive and store the seed. And so rather than expecting to have something come in November to last us till March, and then have another PO coming in March to last us to June, we're advancing all of our POs and bringing them all in now, and getting them through QC and into best storage. One of the things that we saw with the transportation when COVID happened is that there was a breakdown in trucking. And to Adrienne's point, there was a lot of seed travels from Europe to the US in the belly of passenger planes. And when passenger planes stopped flying, there was suddenly much less opportunity to get seeds from Europe into the US as well. And so, we've also developed second shifts and had them, we were running weekend shifts. We've also increased the depth of our purchasing and the depth of our projection packing, and are trying to get as far ahead of our projection packing as we can. One last thing, I am a processor. So if someone finds themselves with a question that they wished that they had asked me in a day or so, please reach out. I'm happy to be that person who answers your email. It's paul@highmowingseeds.com. And I think I'm at my time.
Thank you, Paul. And we have Kim and Adrienne both here to also talk about their operations. And actually, we're going to talk a little bit about how seed crosses borders, which addresses some of this transfer around the world and some of those delays, but also some of those delays are not just related to COVID. And with this, I'm going to hand this off to Adrienne to talk about sort of a follow this seed story related to some tomatoes.
Right, I'm going to take a step back and talk a little bit more about the variety development process and not so much focus on the seed production aspect of it. And also try to, let's see if I can get it moving. There we go. I want to also address one of the questions that came up in the chat. Let me just first start off by saying, giving you a little bit more information about Vitalis Organic Seeds. We're part of Enzazaden, which is an independent family-owned breeding company based in Holland. We have been around since about the 1940s, right around that World War II timeline that Heron mentioned. We work in a number of different vegetable crops, as well as herbs. We have research stations all over the world, 18 commercial subsidiaries. So that means 18 different countries or regions that we're selling seed in. We have 3 production stations for seed, but we also contract extensively with growers throughout the world for our seed production. We're close to 2,000 employees at this point. We do a lot of work in research development. 30% generally of our revenue goes back into R&D. We focus exclusively on vegetable and seed breeding. We don't have any other divisions in our company. And so one of the questions that came up in the chat was, why does it take so long? Why can't it take 6 to 8 weeks for us to get seed to the US, to our warehouse in California from Holland? And there's a couple different reasons for that. One of them, as you can see, the US isn't the only country that's requesting seed from our parent company in Holland. And so unfortunately, because of our systems, we can't just type an email and say, hey, can you ship this seed over tomorrow? There's a whole process that we have to go through in order to get our seed over. It's one of the, challenges, I'd say, of being a large company. We're not as nimble because we have to follow, procedures to make sure that we're not throwing monkey wrenches in the process. So we have to put in it's a process to request our seed from Holland. But then also, as Paul mentioned, there was a real lag during COVID of getting the seed over from Holland because of the lack of transport happening from Europe. And then also, we're importing seed, which is a living biological entity. So there's a lot of regulations, a lot of paperwork that has to go with that seed. And often that seed can get stuck in customs for weeks at a time. And we have no control over that time frame when it's sitting in the customs office before it's inspected and then can be allowed to enter whatever country it's going through. So all of those reasons make it it's not as speedy as we'd like it to be. As I mentioned, our main work is breeding varieties. Vitalis, which focuses exclusively on organic varieties, we breed them and we produce organic seed. We also work in organic seed treatments, and then we sell those varieties to dealers, as I've mentioned. So I wanted to use the example of tomato just to give you a little bit of a picture of how the variety development process works, and for our company anyway, and then some of the challenges that we can encounter along the way. So if we look at tomato as a crop, that's a crop that we as a company spend a lot of time and investment on. We do a lot of tomato breeding, and we have tomato breeding locations throughout the world based on the markets. So we have breeders in Holland, we have breeders in Spain, Italy, Florida, California, Turkey, Malaysia, and India. And they all focus on different segments of tomato based on those markets. But because we're all one company, we can use material. For example, in my trialing, I'm trialing material coming from Spain, I'm trialing material coming from Italy, I'm trialing tomatoes coming from Florida, just to see what is the best fit for our markets. But of course, we're really trying to understand our local markets and make sure that we're developing varieties that are best suited for the customer needs, the eating quality, all the pieces that are unique in different regions and different markets. So one project that I've been working on for a number of years, I call the Buffalo Improvement Project. I actually have a better name for this project that I got from Paul Betz, but I'm not going to put that on the screen because it's proprietary at this point. I want to wait till the variety's ready to release, but the variety's not ready yet, but we've been working on it for a number of years. And it's based on a tomato that Enza developed a decade or more ago called Buffalo. It's a red beefsteak round tomato, indeterminate, about 200 grams, and was really, really appreciated by growers in the Northeast, especially high tunnel growers, because it had really good flavor, a nice thin skin. But one of the biggest problem with Buffalo is that it really didn't have any resistances. And so it was challenging for growers to produce it, especially with issues like leaf mold, powdery mildew, and some of the other issues that a lot of growers see in high tunnel production. So because of that, our company dropped the variety, meaning we stopped carrying it. Sales were declining, and it just didn't seem like it had capacity to stay in the market. Well, a grower in Rhode Island actually in about 2014, got in touch with one of our breeders in Spain and said, hey, we really, really love the buffalo tomato. Can you bring it back? Can you bring it back with the resistances that we need? Because we can't find a really good tasting red tomato that we can grow well in our high tunnels. So the breeding program in Spain started working on an improved buffalo. So that meant going back to the original buffalo, doing new crosses to those parent lines to incorporate disease resistances that were needed to really produce or to grow the variety successfully. And so in 2017 and 2018, we had new lines that we started looking at in the Northeast with grower trials here in Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island. And we started narrowing down all that breeding material to figure out, okay, what's going to be the new buffalo. At the end of last year, we got really excited. We had a couple really top performers. We picked 3 that we thought, okay, these are the closest to the buffalo. We think they really have potential, and we want to do much bigger trials in 2020 to really figure out which one is going to be the new buffalo. This year was going to be our year to select the winner and hopefully get a new commercial variety. Well, what happened was something called the tomato brown rugose fruit virus, and that's something that hopefully all of you are at least aware of. It's something to keep an eye on. It's a new virus that was first discovered in 2014 in heated tomato production in Israel. And in succeeding years, it started to spread in other areas that had a lot of heated glasshouse production. And it's a new virus. It's part of the Tabamo virus group of viruses that has about 37 viruses. It's a very stable group of viruses. It includes tobacco mosaic virus and tomato mosaic virus. And the biggest issue is that it had broken the resistances that had been used by the industry for over 50 years to protect against tomato mosaic virus. And so there was no way to, there was no varieties that had resistance to this new virus, and it spread really, really easily, or it does spread really, really easily. It can be present on seeds. It can be transmitted through irrigation water, pollen, bumblebees, any sort of hand contact with the plants, with the soil. It can be spread through tobacco products, and it can be spread on the fresh fruit and even tomato sauce. So it's really easily spread in a lot of ways, a lot of similarities to COVID. And it has these symptoms that you can see on the screen. So the leaves have sort of this mottling, which is pretty common of a lot of viruses. And then what happens with the fruit is they get this yellow blotching that makes the fruit unsellable. And what happened was, as this variety was spreading more, it was becoming more and more a problem in the big tomato production regions, especially Northern and Southern Europe, Mexico, and Canada, especially in Ontario with all the glasshouse production. In the US, last November 15th, the Department of Ag issued an order on November 15th that went into effect a week later, and it effectively stopped all import of any tomato products into the US without inspection. So that included seeds, fruit, transplants, anything had to be stopped at the border to be inspected. And this caused a huge issue for seeds that were being shipped to the US for the winter sales season, because if those seeds hadn't been tested for this virus, they wouldn't be allowed into the country. And in the case of our Buffalo project, that was exactly what happened. We had those selected lines were being sent to us from Spain so we could trial them in the 2020 season. But because we hadn't had the protocols in place to test all of our seed at that point for the brown rugose virus, we couldn't get the testing done in time to get the seed into the country in order to plant it for our 2020 growing season. So we weren't able to get the seed, and we weren't able to plant any of our improved lines this past year. Now, thankfully, you know, everyone sort of scrambled, of course, with this USDA order, and there was also similar restrictions happening in other countries as well. All the seed companies scrambled to put in place, you know, robust testing. So now, 8 months later, or 10 months, or a year later, I guess, so we're in November, we're testing all of our seed productions, whether it's a commercial seed production or even a small research production, like was the case for the buffalo, to make sure that it doesn't have the brown rugose virus. But we didn't have that in place back then, and it really caused a lot of challenges. So for us, what that means for just the longevity of this, you know, this program is it just has pushed everything that much farther back, right? So we are getting the seed for 2021 trials. Hopefully we'll pick a winner this year. Our seed production then, by the time we have finished our trialing season, we'll have missed the window to produce our tomato seed, which we produce organically, most of it in Thailand. That will go into production in hopefully June of 2022. The seed won't be available until September of 2023. So now we're talking a full decade from the beginning of this new breeding program that we are hopefully going to have a new commercial variety that hopefully all of you guys can try. So with that, I'll end there so we can move on to hear from Kim. But hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of all the steps that we have to go through on our end in order to even develop a new variety, let alone produce the seed of it.
Thank you, Adrienne. I just want to let everybody know, just take a deep breath. It's okay to do a little stretch, you know, kind of center a little bit. We are going to be ending up going over time because we've got a lot to cover, and our presenters are so gracious to stay with us. And so take a deep breath for a second. Kim, what do you think? We'll hand it over to you to talk about the evolution and you know, how you folks at Hawthorne do what you do. And also, please don't forget to check in with us and kind of tell us about the strategies that you have developed to meet the possible demand or just kind of work within COVID. Okay?
Sure. Yep. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here. So we're the little ones here. Much smaller company. Sort of so I'll give you a bit of the regional perspective, I guess. So we started up in 2008. We sell only in Canada. We across Canada. We focus. We haven't started with hybrids. We focus on doing selection work on open pollinated seeds still to this point. We have up to 10 employees. It depends on the time of the year. We have 6 to 8 contract growers, depending on the year. So that's sort of the scale that we're working at. We offer 350 to 400 varieties in our catalog and online. We have the ability, because we grow some of our seed, quite a lot of our seed, but we have the ability to do many smaller seed lots. So we have, for example, with my background in restoration, I have an interest in grasses and flowers. So we offer over 100 flowers, and we do those in much smaller seed lots. And I think we're kind of nimble that way. Since we do the growing, we can offer many more smaller bits. Our company's been growing pretty steadily since we started. Like every year it has grown. And I say we've been growing steadily for most years because in 2020 we grew like crazy, like everybody else. But there's been a nice steady growth and that we're happy with. A lot of people think because we're a regional seed company that we grow all of our own seed, but as Paul has mentioned and Adrienne, as everyone has mentioned, not all seed crops do well in all climates. So we really focus on growing those crops that do well in our seed climate. The seed climate, I first came across that term, John Navazio. He brought up this idea of seed climates. And so we're a hot season area, and we're also kind of wet in the fall, like Paul was talking about. So we focus on these crops that do well in hot seasons, and we do really well with hot season wet seeded crops. I won't read out the list, you can see it. And we do quite well with hot season dry seeded crops. And so we grow a lot of those here on our farm. We have 100 acres. The crops that are a little more difficult for us that we're going to bring in are cool season, are the dry seeded crops. And there's cool season dry seeded crops and warm season dry seeded crops. Again, I won't read out this list, but just to say some of these things we still do here, and we can do them quite well by paying attention. For example, peas, we still grow them, but we keep them off the ground. They're all trellised, so that we have to do a little bit more work to produce quality seed of these crops. So we are able to grow quite a bit of our own seed. The stuff that we can grow well in this region, the crop types, still require isolations. So we can't grow all of them here on our farm. So we contract with growers in our region. So we have growers in Ontario and in Quebec. We have quite a range of contracts. We have Bronwyn Heinrich and her family. Here's her son on the left, Kai. There's 4 of them, and they actually are out in the fields, and they're growing. They're homeschooled, these kids, and they're out there producing seed. Their farm has, they also produce dry beans on a massive scale, but Bronwyn and the 4 kids are busy doing seed contracts. We have another example would be John Ambrose down on Pelee Island, and Pelee Island is one of the most southern land masses in Canada. There's one little island south of it, but it's surrounded by Lake Erie, and they don't get frost there till mid-November. So John does a lot of our biennials for us, and he does things like eggplant that we can ripen here and get our stock seed, and then we give it to John, and he'll grow it out because he has an extra 6 weeks or so without frost, and he can do the seed production for us. And one of what COVID has taught us is that we need to expand our grower network. We are in contact right now. I've just started reaching out to some of the seed growers in Western Canada, in BC, to see about they have a different climate and they can do different crops very well there, and we'll see if we can't get some growing out there and maybe even send some of our seed to them. We also have developed relationships with other seed companies to buy in those crops that don't do well, the crop types that don't do well for us, like high mowing and wild garden seed. We get a lot of our lettuce crops from wild garden seed because it does not do well in our rainy climate here, even though we can produce it. I'm going to touch on a few collaborations we've tried over the years as a means of getting seed. So there's the Peppo project where 3 seed companies, we all got together and each grew out a cucurbita Peppo squash. And then we produced the seed and then we divided it equally amongst the 3 of us. So we got 3 productions in 1 year. That worked fairly well for a few years. Another project was called Seeds of Transition. And this is one where farmers worked with us. So we're the seed company, they're farming. Most of them had CSAs. They would grow out seed crops. We would harvest the seed crops, clean them, germ test them, and give half the seed back to each farmer. Now each farm can either grow that seed out or they can trade amongst themselves and share the seed. And finally, another little project that we have been involved in is a breeding club. It's called Seedworks, and some of you, I believe, are on the call. This is a way to work together to do a little bit of breeding work. We don't have a lot of, we don't have the ability to do a lot of breeding, but we love the idea. So we're working on a few small projects, and we've been mentored by Michael Mazurek. He comes up and spends time with us and is incredibly generous with his time, teaching us how to do some of these projects. One of the supports that has really helped our company and many Canadian seed companies of the same scale as us is, the Bauta Family Initiative on Canadian seed security and seeds of diversity. They provide this incredible support so that we've been able to travel together. We've been able to meet each other, visit each other's farms. We've taken trips down to High Mowing, to Fedco, to see how other seed companies manage, do their packing, their testing, etc. But one of the things that Bauta's worked on that has really benefited these smaller regional seed companies is this farmer training network, where farmers are being trained to grow high quality seed crops that they can then make available to seed companies such as ours and Greta's and Kathy's and other smaller seed companies in Canada. So we were really fortunate to have that happen. We also received support for equipment to help improve our seed quality, which has really helped us grow up. I wanted to just touch really quickly on follow the seed, because one of the things I really like about working at this scale is that we can be very responsive. We can respond quickly because we're growing so much of our own seed, and we're also focused distributing it just in Canada. So we grow, we trial our tomatoes, and then currently we have about 60 varieties, and they're grown on a 3-year rotation. So we grow 20 per year. So we can respond to the market demand pretty quickly. We also, I'm trying to speed it up since we're behind, so I was going to go into more there, but I think I'll just leave it at that. I'll just touch here on some of the things we've done to mitigate the impacts of COVID. We have had to improve our systems. We have a brand new shipping system. We're looking at opening a contract with Canada Post to improve that. We have invested in a grown-up printer. We have a printer that just handles our printing needs really thoroughly right now. What else have we done? We have more staff that are on, and the way that we hire staff has changed because we need staff throughout the season since the orders didn't stop at all. We used to bring staff in about January, February, but now we keep them on. Now we have staff right through this summer and fall. We're fully staffed the entire time. I think I'll just leave it there. I'd like to close with this slide of my son's latest, one of his hundreds of tattoos. And we really like to focus still on saving a lot of seeds and then helping people learn about it. Education is a big part of what we do as well.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay.
I love that tattoo. It's
pretty
it's
great.
kind of the seed community's version of Jake and Elwood from the Blues Brothers.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, so here we are in a great moment where we get to have some Q&A. So we have a couple questions in the chat for the panel. If the three of you would unmute, and we'll just kind of catch as catch can. The first question is about the brown rugose fruit virus. Does anyone know where seed testing is done? Who does it? Anything that you might know about Canada? I guess I'm maybe referring this to Adrienne, or maybe Kim, you might know. Where can people get their seed tested?
There's a lab at the University of Guelph that does testing for some diseases. I'm not sure about that disease in particular. And then there was also a lab we used to use in Brampton. I don't know the name of it offhand, but they would do germ testing and also disease testing. I'm sure if one were to Google Brampton seed testing lab, you'd find that one. Those are the two locations I'm aware of.
Adrienne, do you have any leads maybe for Canadian seed growers? Is there any resources?
I don't know specifically. I saw that message come up in the chat, and I emailed my Canadian colleagues if they have specific names. It's tricky. I mean, we're in the US, we're in a similar situation where there's only a few labs at this point that are able to test for it. It's to really have an accurate test, you need to do a PCR test. Which I guess everyone is now much more familiar with that term with all the COVID news, but it's more reliable than the ELISA test, which is more commonly used for a lot of diseases. So it is a specialized test. So I can imagine that not all labs would have it, but certainly I would think with the giant tomato market in Ontario, that there certainly must be labs in Canada that are able to test for it, since obviously this has had a huge impact on that segment. But I will, when I get feedback from my colleagues, I can send that information to Steph. I guess that'd be the best way. And then Steph, you could then distribute the information to the webinar participants.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. That'd be great.
I guess there is an anti-serum ELISA test that has been developed, but I'm not sure, as you said, Adrienne, if it's as accurate as the polymerase chain reaction test. So it sounds like some of the testing is evolving, trying to get it cheaper and also just like quicker, and so that regular labs can handle it. Oddly enough, a lot of folks used to ship things like this internationally to Agdia, which is a lab in the United States, but I'm not sure if Agdia would accept samples of tomato to test internationally and how that would all work. So it seems like we're at a bit of a bottleneck with this disease. Paul, do you have any experience with this? Any advice that you're giving growers from home?
No, I don't. I can check in with our QC department as to how we're managing, but I don't have the straight answer.
Okay. Next question that we have is, how have the fires in the western part of North America been affecting seed production? Paul, you have any feedback on that? And not from the mic, but just from your experience?
I don't believe that any of our growers have suffered losses. We have growers who purchase seed from us who have suffered losses, and it's pretty devastating. And we also have folks who have been threatened by fire, but the fire has skipped them. I have heard that the air quality was a challenge. Certainly, if you had to be working in that situation, that was definitely affecting the health of the folks that were growing the seed. But I don't know that the seed itself was impacted, but it was really hard for us to watch what was happening. To be clear, it was, yeah, but I don't know that our seed supply has been impacted.
Yeah, I can say from Fedco's and some of the folks who growing seed had to leave their farms basically because of some of the evacuation orders. So I don't know if there was direct damage to crop, but I know that the timing and handling and just operations of some people were affected. And that may result in a smaller crop or what have you. Just, you know, there was weeks there where folks were kind of slingshotting back and forth, just kind of out of their farm or staying with friends, staying at a hotel, what have you. So luckily seems to have abated, but it seems to be, we've had this issue last year.
And farming is hard enough. I mean, without that level of an extra uncertainty kind of put on top of it, like that was the part that I was feeling for folks the most. Like growing the seed is hard enough. Growing the vegetables is hard enough.
Yeah, and when we're growing seed on contract or have a contract with somebody and they're in a whole another location, we have no idea sometimes what stresses they're under, whether it's a new insect or a disease or, you know, a flash flood or a fire. And, you know, you hear fire in the Northeast, and that's what we're all starting to, you know, doing right now is stoking the fire. That's our reference point for fire, you know. So the next question that we have is, this is sort of a little long form. Do the panelists have any thoughts about the best way to create a more secure seed system that balances what Paul has said about where it is best to grow seed and what Adrienne has said about running into the issue of transporting seed from Europe and all over the world during, you know, pandemic or during just, you know, challenges, you know, whatever challenges might come. So we're relying on seed production from one place that is far away. Is this a smooth operation? Is there a way to balance this regional and global production? Does it need to get balanced? Thoughts? Is this a one-off? Any deeper thoughts about that?
I think partly, or you go first, Ken.
No, you go first.
I was going to say part of it has to do with your intended scale of the project. And so when I was saying how one can grow a seed everywhere, but not always get the best quality of seed, there are efforts that you can take to improve the quality of seed being grown in most locations. They just at some point become like not economic. So if your intention is to have a more active part in ensuring that you have what you need every season and increase that economic incentive to the point where you can get past some of those production pieces, then I think that would be one way to answer that question. If you were to invest in tunnels and work with humidity control and be super vigilant in terms of managing that piece, you can create an opportunity where you can grow some open seeded crops in a place that will be a challenge in the field. But you're going to be increasing the cost of that seed fairly significantly. Does that have value at a particular scale? Absolutely. And you know, when we were bringing new varieties to market, we were doing test productions in our trials program, you know, with not being driven by economics to see if we could do things. And there's a place where one can and have a seed that could be used as a stock seed someplace else or supply a local community. So I think it's a question of scale. That's how I would answer that question.
Kim.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about too. I wanted to use the example of carrot. We can grow carrot seed here on our farm quite well, but the problem is we have Queen Anne's lace everywhere. So there's a point where it just doesn't make sense. So for a Nantes carrot, where we need a larger supply of the seed, we either we would buy that in, or possibly connect with growers in an area where they don't have the weed and send our stock seed to that grower. So in Western Canada, possibly. But something like a cosmic purple carrot, a specialty carrot, we don't sell as much of it. And we can probably do the selection on our roots here. And then we have a pollination tunnel. And it makes economic sense for us to grow that carrot on the farm. So it's very much about scale. I really like one of the things I like about the scale that our company works at is that we don't need to buy huge quantities of seeds. So we do have the ability to have many smaller contracts nearby, and I think it makes it a lot easier to work for us to work at that scale. You know, I've kind of lost my train of thought here.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's all about scale, I think.
Yeah.
I would echo what Paul and Kim have said, I mean, that was our experience as well here at Vitalis. When Vitalis started, it was started by a breeder, Jan Velma, in Holland, and he started Vitalis Organic Seeds with the goal of providing organic seeds for the organic market. And after doing that for a number of years, he determined that he just wasn't able to have reach the scale, the number of growers that he really wanted to. And so he actually started to look around at other companies in Holland to say, who can I partner with to be able to bring more organic seed to more growers? And so again, it was a question of scale, and it was his choice actually to partner with Enza Zaden to be able to scale up and be able to produce a wider assortment of vegetables and more seed production than he was able to do at the level. And that was because that was the goal, that was what he wanted to do. And so it really does come down to like, what is your goal, and right, who are you trying to serve with your seed productions? So.
Yeah, I think the who we are serving is important. You know, the scale part is about the serving. If I'm trying to grow seed for multiple farmers that are intending, or companies that are intending to scale at 1,000 to 3,000 acres, then obviously I'm not going to grow that seed here in Maine. You know, but there's lots of microclimates, as everybody or a lot of folks on this Zoom probably know about, there where cabbage seed was being grown in the Maritimes and in Maine and on islands and in different little places where things get less or more rain. I know in Maine we have a whole, I won't call it an archipelago, but we have a whole series of islands where it's actually fairly dry, and in many places is not raining from basically the middle of June till the end of August or into the end of September. And I've had some growers grow some really amazing brassica seed there. But this is small batch seed. This isn't 10 acres of seed. It's a small amount of seed, but it's amazing how much seed can come off of 100 turnip plants. And I think that element of stock seed production, there's been some questions in the chat about stock seed production. Small scale production allows a person to do a level of maintenance, variety maintenance and variety selection that is just harder to do, and without a larger staff and a larger community of large scale growers. So stock seed and the value of stock seed and the value of really high selected strains, particularly when open pollinated stuff, is something that regional seed production is better at. Basically, that's something that we are better at than another level. Hybrid seed production, you're gonna be challenged to produce a crop of hybrid cabbage seed in the Northeast. That would be, like Paul said, we could do it. But after we'd get done, we wouldn't be speaking to each other, and we'd all lost all of our money. So next question just is, a person is interested in growing vegetable seed for contract. What are the valuable, what are you looking for from a potential contractor grower? This person lives in Guelph, Ontario, and has about 15 years of growing organic vegetables. So Kim, I'll start with you. What are you looking for in a grower? What are the prerequisites, or who are you trying to woo into this?
I'm looking for growers who have some experience, but with growing seed, but we're also willing to work to do some education around seed production with them. We're always looking for crops that do well in this region, but require large isolation distances, because that's where the bottleneck is for us. So we don't really need growers to produce tomatoes for us, but we're always looking for cucurbits, for example, corn, for example, what else? Those types of crops. And we can provide stock seed, and we can work with the grower the first couple of years. What we tend to do is we will also grow that crop on our farm as well for the first couple of run-throughs until we're sure that, and until the grower feels comfortable and we feel comfortable that it will be a success. It's also, I think, in a grower, when you're first starting to grow seed, I think sometimes when someone's got a farm operation, they're going to market and they decide that they're going to also take on a seed crop. The fit isn't always there, you know, when the seed crop needs attention, maybe there's too much demand from the market side of the operation. So we like to talk to potential growers about that. Is it a good fit? Do you have the time to do the roguing, the selection, etc.? And again, sometimes Guelph is very close to us, so you know that's the type of situation where we may go down and do roguing and selection on the field as well as the grower. Whereas someone in Quebec, we couldn't do that, and we would need to know that they're a more skilled grower, had a more experience. So those are, I guess, my thoughts.
And I can just speak from the Fedco end. We're definitely, you know, continuing to look for seed growers. We have a small and very capable contingent in Canada, and of course there are these sort of things, these bubbles that come up that occasionally limit our ability to import seed from our contract growers in Canada, but hasn't been a problem so far, and we are continuing to look for growers, and most of, in the same realm of crops that Kim outlined for Hawthorne, and we also buy seed from Hawthorne. So we're all kind of buying from each other. Fedco buys seeds from High Mowing and from Vitalis and from Kim and from you, and we also sell to you. So these are all like, it's a web of give and take. Kim, I probably got the chat, but
I did, yeah.
Yes, go ahead and answer that question about the organic part.
Yeah, one thing I didn't mention is our growers need to be certified organic, as everything, 100% of what we offer is certified organic. So that is a requirement if someone's going to grow for us.
Yep. Paul, would you like to weigh in on their contract growing in Canada?
I don't know that we have producers in Canada at this time. And Kim, while you were speaking, I was looking. We have an initial request PDF that I was looking to find, and I'll make that available off camera so it can be distributed to the folks who are in attendance in terms of just like basic metrics in terms of folks that we're looking for to be a producer for us.
Oh, nice.
Certainly, you know, years of production experience, those kinds of things. And it's interesting, you mentioned what it means to actually be a seed producer and a vegetable grower. And oftentimes it's not the best energetic fit. And I struggled with it at the time. I was younger in my farming career and had less capacity to do more things at the time. But I found it to be really challenging to manage the different requirements in terms of crop type, and watching a vegetable go past prime sale oftentimes towards seed. You know, the economics are not quite the same. They're oftentimes more equivalent than you might think because the amount of handling that one brings to a seed crop versus a market crop that you're harvesting 2 to 3 times a week is completely different. And it's important to keep that in mind. But I also found that towards the end of the year, I just wanted to be checking off boxes and putting the place to bed. And suddenly I had this fairly large lift that was left to do, and struggled with that piece of it.
I wonder, you know, I think we were thinking that everyone on this Zoom is from this particular Northeast region, but it's possible that other folks are from those drier parts of Canada or even Vancouver. And that probably is some areas of seed production that many of us probably are in the stateside are not familiar with and probably should do some research into. I wonder, Adrienne, does your company have any seed production in the greater Northeast or in Canada as a whole at this time?
No, I'm not aware of any seed production that we're doing in Canada, nor in the Northeast. We have seed productions out in California, Oregon, and Washington. But we might have something right across up in the Northwest. Actually, we might have stuff up in BC, but I'm not as involved in seed production, so I can't say for sure.
One of the crops that I was told by an old spinach breeder was that was one of the crops that they utilized some of the drier portions of Canada's middle portion, because basically the farther you go north, the farther you can select for bolt resistance, bolt tolerance, basically in the parent lines. And so they are breeding very bolt tolerant spinach, or hybrids, and creating breeding lines, and also creating hybrids in the grain growing regions of Canada. So there's been some diversity of use at times. Whether or not that's the case now, I'm not aware. Well, it seems like we have all been wonderful with each other. Everyone's been patient. It's amazing. And I just want to give a big round of thanks to our presenters. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Steph, for being awesome. So we'll be having another webinar this afternoon. Steph, would you like to inform us all about that before we go?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So today's webinar was the first of 4. So we have another one coming up this afternoon. That's 4:30 Atlantic time or 3:30 Eastern. And then we have 2 webinars tomorrow. So a couple of things that came up today: stock seed quality for people who want to be taking their seed production to the next level, potentially for contract seed sales. I'd really recommend coming to the webinars. So I hope that you will do that. And I look forward to seeing you guys later today and again tomorrow.
Heron, right. We would still be talking even after a hybrid cabbage production.
Oh, I love those. I love experiments. So
okay,
we continue. Yes, but of course,
I think it would take much more than that to make us not talk to each other.
We'd be so much smarter, but we'd be broke, and it's okay. But at the same time, like, these are all things, that folks who we know are playing with, and just because what we're not doing today doesn't mean what we might not do tomorrow. So I think we're evolving a lot of what is considered the construct of seed system and seed industry. And if we had this discussion 10 years from now, it might be different people, but it also might be completely different parameters. So let's just keep evolving together. And on that note, have a good afternoon. We'll all get some lunch, and some of us will reconvene in a few hours. Take care, everyone. Be well.
Care.
Thanks.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye all.
Bye.